Maybe you are familiar with Guy Fieri's show Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, where the mayor of Flavortown travels around the US to find some great food at local restaurants, to find those hidden gems around the country. Well, today I decided to put my own spin on this idea by trying to find the hidden gems in Dynasty ADP that you can go out and buy super cheap. Fair warning though, these names may be gross and it may get ugly, but welcome into the first episode of Dynasty Fallers, Fill-ins, and Flyers. First up, we have a player whose Dynasty value has fallen dramatically over the past 6 months, and rightfully so after his 2021 performance, but I believe that there is still some juice left to be squeezed out of Kenny Golladay, wide receiver for the New York Giants. And now, maybe this is just me putting on my rose-colored glasses because Kenny Golladay was my first major rookie hit back in 2017 in his rookie draft, but I really do not want to believe that Galladay's new production standard is what he put on the field last year with the New York Giants. I mean, this is a wide receiver who has produced 2 1,000-yard seasons very early in his career with a top 24 and a top 10 fantasy season on his resume, and now all of a sudden I'm just supposed to believe that he just can't do that anymore? No, I don't want to believe that. I get it. His 2021 season was horrendously bad. Still somehow better than Allen Robinson's, but very, very bad with only 521 yards, no touchdowns on 37 receptions in 14 games. So because of that production, combined with the fact that he'll be 29 years old this year, Golladay has plummeted in ADP from his 5th to 6th round value in July to a now 10th round value from January ADP, which will only drop farther as we start integrating this year's rookie class. He is currently around other wide receivers like Laviska Shenault, Terrace Marshall, and Josh Palmer, all guys who have legitimately done nothing in their careers, even though we're still hopeful that they can be productive later on down the road. And that's really what this comes down to for Golladay, in my opinion, is hope.
What is it they've sent us?
Hope.
I have hope that the Giants won't be the worst or second worst offense in the league again in 2022. I have hope that Daniel Jones stays healthy for all 17 games this year and he doesn't have Mike Glennon or Jake Fromm at quarterback. I have hope that new head coach Brian Daboll can actually do something with this team and these weapons like he did in Buffalo. And I don't think the problem is Kenny Golladay. I think it's the New York Giants. Last year, Kenny Golladay saw 76 targets in 14 games, which is 92 over a 17-game season. If you want to exclude a couple games and give him an excuse for injuries and whatnot, we can throw out week 5 where he got hurt early in the game, as well as weeks 9 and 11, which were the first 2 games he played back from injury. That puts us at 68 targets over 11 games, or 105 over a 17-game season. If you look at his game log, though, you will notice that he had a handful of games where he was heavily targeted 7 or 8 times a game. In fact, he had as many or more games with 7 or more targets last year than Devonta Smith, Tyler Boyd, Courtland Sutton, DeAndre Hopkins, and Brandon Ayuk, and only 1 fewer of those games than Amari Cooper, Tyler Lockett, and Odell Beckham Jr. He got the volume that you want to see from a team wide receiver 1. He just had horrific quarterback play that turned 8 targets in a game into 2 receptions for 15 yards or 3 for 22 or 3 for 38. Like, that's horrendous for fantasy football. And Golladay right now can be had for super cheap in startups and trades. I already mentioned his ADP is around the 10th round in January, which I expect to continue to fall throughout the spring. But in trades, literally 3 of the 5 most recent trades for Golladay in the DLF Trade Finder are Golladay for Myles Gaskin, Golladay for a 2022 3rd and 4th round rookie pick, and another with the same 2022 3rd and 4th round picks, but they felt they needed to add a bit more to make it fair, so they included OJ Howard. How thoughtful of them. This is an NFL wide receiver 1 being traded for nearly nothing in Dynasty, and we should be taking advantage of it because even if his top 10 fantasy days are over and in the past, I don't think his usable wide receiver 3 days are over, and those are what I want to acquire in Dynasty and to buy at wide receiver 5 or wide receiver 6 prices. Next up, we have our fill-in, which I would define to fit in 2 ways. Number 1, as a player you probably won't trade for outright, but rather as a fill-in to sweeten a deal or equal out some value in a trade. But then also 2, potentially be able to start this player as a fill-in during the season in case of buys or injuries. And just to prove that I'm not a hater, I do believe one of the biggest dynasty buys right now is actually Trey Sermon, running back for the San Francisco 49ers, who, like Kenny Golladay, Trey Sermon has also lost significant value since last summer and is now all the way down in the 13th round of January ADP as a borderline top 50 running back. And I will say, I do not expect Trey Sermon to win the starting job back this year. So for anybody out there hoping that I would give you that kind of hope back, I'm sorry, that's not what this is about. But what makes Trey Sermon a huge dynasty buy for me is the possibility that he gets up to a handful of games in 2022 as the 49ers starting running back. And at his current price, that possibility is something that I want to invest in. This is actually the same process that brought me to Elijah Mitchell last year. So if these trends continue, we might have something here in Trey Sermon. And the process was the understanding that the 49ers offense is one that I know will have great fantasy production, and especially at the running back position, whoever they put back there at running back is going to do well more often than not, no matter how talented that player actually is. We also know that running backs, especially 49ers running backs, it seems, over the last few years, tend to get hurt fairly often, giving opportunities to other players on that depth chart. And Elijah Mitchell, as much as I love him, has shown that he might struggle with injuries as well because he played only 11 games last year. So if that happens again, Trey Sermon could be the guy given the opportunity to be the Niners starter for as many games as Elijah Mitchell misses. And this would especially be true if the Niners don't re-sign Raheem Mostert or Jeff Wilson, as both of them are unrestricted free agents, and Sermon actually goes into the 2022 season as the 49ers RB2 behind Elijah Mitchell. Those types of running backs are always guys that I want to acquire super cheap because they can give you a spot start RB2 or even spot RB1 performance in any given week when the starter gets hurt. If Mitchell doesn't get hurt, well, then you just have a depth running back on your team that you pay depth running back prices for. Speaking of prices, I already mentioned that Trey Sermon is super cheap based on ADP, but from recent trades as well, he is that extra throw-in piece to what are already fairly even trades like Dawson Knox and Marlon Mack for DJ Chark, Trey Sermon, and a 2022 second, or a 2023 first and second for Cooper Kupp and Trey Sermon. But he can also be traded for individually by himself, like Trey Sermon for a 2022 third and fourth round rookie pick, or Trey Sermon for Justin Jackson. So at those prices, why not just see if Trey Sermon can give you a few starting weeks in 2022? Last up, we get to our Flyer, which is now the cheapest player in this video to acquire right now and is actually not even a top 250 asset in January ADP, and that is Jaguars tight end Dan Arnold. And actually, you should probably get used to hearing this name a lot as we move through the 2022 offseason, because I can really see Arnold quickly becoming this year's Adam Troutman as literally everybody's sleeper tight end for 2022. But I'm going to try and be one of the first people on this because Dan Arnold has the athleticism, he has the opportunity to not only be the next sleeper tight end, but maybe even the next breakout tight end a la Darren Waller a couple years ago. Arnold is still kind of young for a tight end. He's turning 27 here soon in March of 2022. He came into the NFL as a wide receiver who converted to tight end because he's 6'5", 240 pounds, and he ran a 4.63 40-yard dash. So now we take that athleticism, we combine it with the great opportunity to potentially be the Jaguars' top receiving target. Like, I'm not kidding. That possibility is there if the Jacksonville Jaguars move into 2022 with their current offense, because DJ Chark is gone. No way he's back in Jacksonville, in my opinion. So that leaves a 32-year-old Marvin Jones, Laviska Shenault, Travis Etienne, and Dan Arnold. And we actually saw Arnold in this type of role in 2021. He spent the first 3 weeks of last season with the Carolina Panthers, but then was traded to the Jaguars before week 4. Week 4, he saw 2 targets, but whatever, first game with a new team after being traded, no worries, whatever. Weeks 5 through 10, however, his targets were 8, 5, 10, 7, 8, which is 38 targets over a 5-game span, or 130 over 17 games. He was a great PPR tight end. He scored double-digit fantasy points in 4 out of those 5 games without even scoring a touchdown. So we saw him be heavily targeted as the starting tight end last year, but now pair that with new head coach Doug Peterson and his affinity for targeting the tight end position for basically a decade, dating all the way back to Travis Kelce with the Chiefs and more recently Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert with the Philadelphia Eagles. Since 2016, Peterson has averaged between 10 to 15 targets to the tight end position per game. That was with a less athletic Zach Ertz by himself, and then a less athletic Zach Ertz with a way more athletic Dallas Goedert since 2018. Now, granted, today Arnold has not shown that he should be in the conversation with Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert, let alone even Travis Kelce. But if the offense stays how it is without a true alpha wide receiver one, why not continue the trend of hyper targeting your tight end, especially one who's an athletic 6'5" tight end who runs a 4.6 40-yard dash? And again, at Dan Arnold's current dynasty price of basically free or even being on waivers, why not just stash him and see what happens? Because worst case scenario, you know who your first cut is in the summer. But best case scenario, you have an every week starting tight end that is invaluable in fantasy and especially in Dynasty. So let me know down in the comments how you guys feel about these three players. I did try to warn you at the beginning that it might get ugly, so it may have been pretty gross to some of you out there, but hopefully it was informative and actionable for a lot of you guys out there in your Dynasty leagues to go out and try to acquire these players for super cheap just to see what happens through 2022 and beyond. In a similar spirit of buying or selling players in Dynasty, I have a series of buying or selling individual players that is now 3 videos in. So you can click on either one of these 2 videos and watch either one, either on Amon-Ra St. Brown or Elijah Mitchell. And with that all being said, guys, thank you all so much for watching. We'll catch y'all later.